Hey guys, what's up? Public back with another video, and this is the third installment in our series looking at the legendary powers for Shadow Priest. Today we're going over Talbadar Stratagem. This is the newest legendary we got added in the most recent one. It is unfortunately not an AoE legendary, which is what a lot of us were hoping for, although there is actually some talents that could play into some AoE capabilities with it, which is kind of exciting. So let's talk about what it is and how it works and maybe some ways we can make it better and give feedback about it. Alright, let's get started. Okay, so Talbadar Stratagem, it's actually an old tier bonus that we used to have, I believe, something like that. But basically, it's while you have Shadowward Pain, Devouring Plague, and Vampiric Touch active on the same target, your Mind Blast deals 30% more damage to that target specifically, right? So this is particularly great, obviously, on single target when we have a generally a pretty good uptime of all three dots. Really, the only concern here is Devouring Plague. Vampiric Touch, Shadowward Pain, you should have 100% uptime of pretty much all the time, like almost no excuses, with the only caveat really being on, AoE if the mobs aren't living long enough or if you're using Searing Nightmare. Which is why this gets kind of weird because, on these big AoE pulls, this isn't going to give you any value, right? Because it is just a flat, you need all three dots to get any benefit, unlike our Mastery, which gives us damage increase per dot. Which is the biggest problem with this is that, having that kind of relatively small window where you have Devouring Plague up on a target and you have Mind Blast active to cast into it is kind of difficult, and this gets harder and harder the more targets you add, which again can be okay. This is maybe that single target legendary, but it is kind of lame that we didn't get an AoE legendary here, so I'm a little salty about that. So the interesting part is we did get a new talent with the Shadowlands rework called Psychic Link, and now what Psychic Link does, it actually replicates a percentage of our Mind Blast damage to any other target that has Vampiric Touch active, which is very interesting, right? So this can kind of all play together. So if you have kind of a spread cleave fight where you have, maybe you're taking Misery as well, so you get Shadowward Pain, Vampiric Touch on all these mobs, you can maybe 3 or 4. And then you're also using Talbadar Stratagem here, and you kind of tunnel into a single target, get your Devouring Plague up. Then once you cast Mind Blast, the increased damage of that Mind Blast, because of this legendary, does get replicated to all those targets, right? The interesting part here is that you don't need all three dots on every target to get the increase. Just because of how Psychic Link works, it is just a flat percentage of what that initial Mind Blast is. So that part is actually a really, really interesting synergy with this legendary. It's one of the reasons why I do really like it a lot. The problem is, again, the fact that it's reliant on Devouring Plague just kind of feels bad here. Mostly just because of that window, right? And just because, Devouring Plague is kind of a short duration, right? It's a 6-second dot. Can be extended a little bit, though, with Pandemic. And Mind Blast has a relatively long cooldown, right? It's a longer cooldown than Devouring Plague's duration. So here, the tricky part is kind of to balance and weigh. Is it better to save that Mind Blast to make sure I use it while Devouring Plague is active? Or maybe it's just better to make sure to try to desync those cooldowns up so you have Mind Blast available during that Devouring Plague window. And that's kind of the awkward part of this legendary is that, you really don't want to use Mind Blast if you don't have Devouring Plague up on the target, but you also do want to use Mind Blast to get that Insanity generation. So that's the awkward part of this legendary, is that needing that full Devouring Plague. Obviously, this is less of a problem inside of Void form, where we're currently kind of flooded with Insanity, and we get the extra charge of Mind Blast, which is nice. But for the majority of our rotation, when we're not in Void form, like about 80% of the time or whatever, depending on your talent, that is kind of the annoying part of this legendary outside of that kind of single target or that kind of multi-target window, right? So in my opinion, the easiest way to fix this is to make it just work just like our Mastery, where there is fall off damage, and instead of being a flat 30%, if you have all three dots, it's a 10% per dot that you have. That way you're not, getting full benefit out if you Mind Blast without full dots, but you're not getting nothing either. I think that would just make this feel way, way, way better, and I think it'd be really sweet to have that kind of alternative build play style with Psychic Link, Misery, and this legendary really playing together, maybe even Unfurling Darkness as well. And I love having that synergy. I think it's really cool and interesting. Now, the other thing I do want to mention with this legendary is right now that is just a 30% increase to Mind Blast, which actually isn't that much. Mind Blast isn't that big of a chunk of our damage depending on what talents you're taking, right? Could be upwards of 10% depending on what you're doing or that burst window of your content, but right now that 30% increase actually isn't that much. And right now, unfortunately, it's not really beating out any other legendary in any specific fighting scenario. So I'm kind of hoping that with the changes I'm suggesting here, with having it work even if you don't have all three dots up, maybe some scale that damage down a little bit, Maybe also buffing that initial damage as well to actually get some use with this guy. I think that could be really, really interesting. So we'll see what they do. There's definitely a few tune knobs they have access to here. It's just got to be a little careful because, you know, you don't want to tune down a talent like, say, don't nerf Psychic Link because the legendary is strong. I hope they, you know, leave that alone and only change the legendary itself. But, you know, time will tell. We'll see what happens. And anyways, guys, that's it for this legendary. So let me know what you guys think about it. And let me know if you're interested in that build or if that sounds cool to you. I'm personally kind of excited to see if they change this up or make this a bit more versatile. But we'll see what happens. All right, guys, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.